Welcome to another episode of the Share Life podcast. This is a Share Life Academy workshop. Today I'm here with Jim Karwisch and Toby Bloomberg. Jim, say hello.
Hello.
Toby, say hello.
Hi.
You are all in for a treat because I'm here with two of my favorite people. Toby. Toby and I met many years ago through the Atlanta Interactive Marketing Association. We were on the board together. And we've actually worked on many client projects together. She's a social media strategist and freelance consultant. She also is a freelance writer, has done some stuff for the Restaurant Informer and working on something for Georgia Trend. And she has done a lot of writing in the culinary and cooking arena. So Toby, thank you for joining us today to talk about staying aligned under pressure. Jim is a narrative coach. He helps people untangle the things that are holding them back so that they can move forward with their life, be successful in their family, their community, and their work. And he's going to help us understand how to maintain our values and integrity when challenges arise, the pressure mounts, and the easy thing to do is to buckle. So, Jim, thank you for joining us. Thank you for hosting and leading us. I will let you take it from here.
I'd like to just start out with a couple of narratives that tend to pop up in relationship to the idea that alignment isn't an easy thing to do because of the stories that we tell ourselves, the pressures that we feel from the outside to change our decisions and our actions. To get started, I just have a few tangled narratives as examples. And then if you and Toby could, as we're going along, identify any of these that feel like something you've experienced before. One of the tangles might be, if I'm not perfectly consistent, then I'm failing. Right? My real priorities have to wait until everything else is handled, right? Everything else comes first, and then my priorities or my values come last.
Yeah.
I can't say no without letting people down. I'm stuck in habits that don't fit, but change is too risky. And then it's too late to realign. I've gone too far down this path. So do any of those resonate with either of you?
Yes. I will go, I'll give a couple, and then Toby, you can throw your hat in the ring. My real priorities have to wait until everything else is handled. I thought, when I had Noodlehead Marketing, particularly the earlier years, when I had my marketing company, that's kind of how I operated, and it was definitely a burden. When you have to make payroll and you can't pay the staff and you end up, or at least for me, I ended up paying the staff. So I ended up shortchanging myself, going some seasons without paying myself. I can't say no without letting people down, being the bad guy, so to speak. That was something in the Noodlehead days that I like. A lot of these kind of relate to those struggles that I faced. And yeah, so those are a couple thoughts. Toby, what do you think?
I can definitely relate to I can't say no. I don't want to let people down, and when somebody asks me to do something, I more than not will say yes, even if it's going to cause a hardship, or if I have to do things differently in other aspects in order to fit that in. Jim, would you call that people pleasing?
Sure. Yeah. There's people pleasing as the instinct I need to keep everybody happy, but then there's also a deeper value that can conflict with other values, which is I need to do the right thing. I need to do it. I need to do everything the correct way. I need to say yes and be the one that is strong and helpful, and that's my role. And this role conflicts with what I might or my family might need, or my community might need, or any of my other values. So yeah, I think people pleasing could be it, or it could also just be I want to do things right, and I want to be seen by others as the person who's doing them right, even if right is somebody else's version of right and not my own version of right.
Yeah, that's interesting because yeah, like having like the motivation could be different on why you do it, why you say no, can't say no. I mean, a couple things that I think of is, I just remember I had a speaking event, in 2013 that I had to cancel, and I just felt so bad because I was speaking at this event and I had to, tell the person running it, I can't be there, right? And then in other situations where it's like saying no would have been the merciful thing, like the good thing to do, and to do it as early as possible. But I let it kind of go on. And then by the time I actually had to say no, I put the person more in a bind than if I had just been proactive with it and been willing to do that. And so that was definitely a challenge that I had to kind of work through for myself.
That's a great example to start with, I think, a real case study to work from. So if you were truly acting in alignment with your values and everything was going well from the beginning, and you recognized early on that there was something that was out of alignment and that you needed to do something to fix it, how much better it would have been for everyone involved if when you recognized it, you had done something about it. But I think sometimes we hang in there. I come from a theater background, storytelling background, acting background. Yeah. And so a lot of
theater nerds.
Yeah.
theater nerds, I think we're geeks, actually.
I guess I'm kind of a theater nerd because, in high school, but I didn't carry on.
Carry on. You didn't carry the torch forward.
I am in a few movies, if you see
you are in
Tom
some
Cruise,
movies. Yeah.
I am American made. So
I'm very impressed, and I'm kind of starstruck. I think you in that particular instance were battling between knowing that you had committed to doing something and not wanting to say I can't do this, right? So there was a conflict there. But in the end, the thing that did win out was you couldn't do that thing because of, and what was the actual, what ended up being it?
What ended up being the reason?
Yeah. If that's worth sharing,
well,
or
it's a little,
okay
it's a little
to share.
complicated, but I had too many things. I'll just kind of put it at generally speaking, I had too many things going on, and I was not in a position to be able to give it the quality presence required to do it well.
Yeah.
And so I sensed that I didn't really fully, but the reason it's a little complicated is I didn't even realize some of that until after I said no, So
Yeah.
there was just something in me that I felt like I needed to say no, and I wasn't saying no, but it wasn't clear to me in the moment. So
that's another element that's really important to look at is, can we, because we can't say no to things, can we get ourselves to a place where we're overcommitted, and the overcommitment itself becomes the problem that we then have to do something about later on. So ultimately, if you had recognized that you were already pretty booked up and rather committed as it was before adding this thing, then needed to give I'm sorry at the beginning, as they were asking you to be a part of it, you're just, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm just so booked up and so overcommitted. I'm not trying to sound like I'm really important, but I've just got all this stuff already. I don't think I could do justice to what it is that you're trying to do. They might be disappointed. They might have to go and oh man, you were my first pick. Now I'm gonna have to go find somebody else. But the difference between that and last minute having this open spot, this cancellation, that commitment, recognition, self-awareness, making choices based on your values and your current commitments. If that was an ongoing check-in with yourself, if you had said, you know what, I don't think this is the right thing to do, and you said no at the beginning, that no is so much easier than the no at the last second. We don't always recognize that. We don't always notice.
Well, let me add it.
Yeah,
well, let me add
ahead.
a couple layers here. Part of what made it harder was I really pushed to speak at this event, right?
Okay,
so I made it happen, and then I had to pull out, right? So there's that piece of it, and then the second piece that I'll throw out there, we can tease out later, but by doing it all the wrong way, it created regret, which then informed, by taking that regret and learning from it, it informed me for the future in some helpful ways, and we can explore that later. But the first part was I just wanted to give that contrast of, I really wanted to speak at this event, and I really did things to make it happen, and then at the end, I ended up at the last minute canceling when I should have canceled a couple weeks earlier.
Yeah.
So Jim, it sounds like what we're talking about is something that you've mentioned several times is that the alignment, the step back, needs to you need to understand your own values. And so if your value is that I have to do things in a quality manner, and if it's in the back of your mind, can I do this in the manner that is part of my value system?
Yeah.
And you're overextended, then maybe it's easier to say no because you know you're not going to meet your own value system.
Yeah. And the tangle in it can be, it's in this case, in Jason's, his own ambition and his desire to do something great, like be a speaker at a conference. He was probably pushing himself a little bit. He had a stretch goal. He wanted to do something challenging and interesting and maybe get his name out there a little bit. While at the same time, he also had a goal and a value of doing things the right way and making sure that he's thorough and has planned things out and gives people what they've signed up for. And so those two things, having the cognitive dissonance of I've signed up for the thing and I don't feel like I can say that I don't want to do this because I pushed for it, right? Like I can't back out of this, but at the same time, I can't do it justice and I'm going to end up doing a poor job for everyone involved. So which one gives? Do I show up and do a bad job? Do I not show up and leave this person hanging and they have to find some other person to fit in or fill in?
Well, and I think talking about the value piece, I think having clarity on the value is actually really helpful here because let's say like dependability or reliability is a value of mine, which it is more explicitly now. But if I'm going to say yes, what does that look like? Right? That looks like one thing. But if I'm going to say no, that looks like something too. And I actually failed my value in that sense because of how I responded when I did decide no. Right. And I also failed in my decision, like making the decision, because a reliable, dependable person would do it in a certain way, and I failed to do that.
Yeah.
So the value in retrospect allows me to interrogate or audit that situation, to your point, Toby, I think, to identify what the values I was holding, and to your point, Jim, what was conflicting, the competing values, which requires a higher level value to sort of organize them in something that allows me to make that decision more effectively, perhaps. So I don't know. What do you think?
When you have to make a choice like you were making, if you think about it, this is a lot more dramatic than the type of instance we're talking about here. But if you were talking about an emergency room and the staff and the surgeons and everyone working under one leader who's making the decisions in triage, who goes where, who gets treated next, they have a very specific set of values and a very specific set of predetermined choices. If this is happening to you and you're waiting to get into the emergency room, you're going to be treated before this other person. And if you have this, you might be very uncomfortable or in a lot of pain, or you might be extremely traumatized at the moment, but you're not going to be seen as quickly as the person who's having the heart attack. You're not going to be seen as quickly as the person who actually is, something very dramatic. I'm trying not to be gross here, but something is happening with them that is it's life or death right now. And if your values, step one is to identify your values, but step two is to have them ordered in such a way that you know which one would win out if they conflicted with each other. And in this particular case, the one that won out in Jason's story was that he didn't feel okay about presenting something of less quality in front of an audience, even though he had pushed to do the thing in the first place. He didn't feel comfortable, and that value won out. And so that was the end result. Was he didn't do the thing, and they found somebody else, I imagine, filled in the spot with something else, and they continued on. So knowing not just what do I value, but if I had to make a choice between these two things, the easiest one always for people is, unless they have some sort of, unless they're a sociopath and have children, the easiest one is my family and what their health and their safety is going to come before these other things. And so you need to do this. No, I don't need to do this. I'm getting my family out of here is a common value triage kind of experience, right? No, my family in this particular case comes first, and I'm not going to do whatever my job says I need to do. I'm not going to do whatever my commitment to the church says I need to do. I'm going to go take care of them. That one is kind of a no-brainer for a lot of people. But sometimes the clarity of the other values they have, it's not there. They don't know what they would pick over two things until they finally have to pick. And by the time in this story you picked, it was too late to honor really any component of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the other thing I would add is, because I had situations in those earlier years too, where I did want to help people, and the way that I thought I could help them is like bringing them into the company, hiring them or giving them an internship. And that what ended up happening is some of the people I wanted to help, I actually harmed. So I actually did the opposite of my value because of how I was going about it. Mm-hmm. So my intention was to do one thing, but then I ended up creating the opposite effect. And so I think sometimes we can and I can also think of another situation where I went into debt, not because, which was a value I wanted to stay debt free in that situation, but I ended up making some bad decisions, which led me to getting into debt. So a lot of times we can make decisions and act in certain ways that actually create self-fulfilling prophecies of the opposite of the value we hold.
Yeah. Yeah, so understanding what the values are, how they align with each other, how they might be prioritized over each other, which one would win out, and then comparing that with what you have as far as opportunities go, or as far as pressures go, right? In this particular case, you were the pressure. You tried really hard to get in there. It could have been somebody who was a friend of yours, and you understood that you just didn't have the capacity to do the thing, but they pushed and pushed and pushed, and finally you said yes to be the speaker, and then had to back out at the last minute because you knew from the start you didn't have the capacity for it. You just couldn't say no to that person. They were too charming, or they were holding, your relationship as leverage or something like that.
That's the other thing. Go ahead, Toby. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, and the other side of the story is once you realize that, and once you make that decision not to go forward, what happens to you as a person with your values and relationships? So that's always interesting. Do you take a step back, and do you reevaluate, realign your alignment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Justin, what did you do? I mean, I knowing you, I would imagine that was a very difficult decision to make on several different aspects.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Like one thing that comes to mind is I think we underestimate how maybe weak we are, or how much when there's enough pressure, whether it's social pressure or relational pressure or financial pressure, we are bucklers. We humans are bucklers. You just give it enough. If you haven't buckled yet, just give it a little bit more time and a little bit more pressure, and you'll get there. We kind of get to that end. So that's one thing, I think, appreciating that. And then by appreciating that, then we can kind of arrange things, knowing that we're dependent and vulnerable in that way, so that we don't get ourselves in positions that can be exploited, or be exploited easily, at least. Mm-hmm. So if I'm like in debt and I owe all this money and I'm like don't have any work, like now I'm more vulnerable to someone exploiting me. Like, hey, why don't you buy this shiny gold watch on the side of the street? So that's one thing. And then the other part of it is, one of the things that I did after I kind of made a lot of mistakes in my business is I went back to as many of those people as I could to reconcile with them, to apologize, to take ownership of my part, and to ask for forgiveness. And most people were receptive to that. There were a few that took some time, and there were some that just never were interested. But that was part of the growing process, to your point, Toby, like taking responsibility and facing that, and then learning those lessons, and then and then that informs and kind of builds character in myself, so that that shapes how I interact in future situations in terms of the situations I get myself into, and then how I handle them when I get myself into them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
All right. Let's, I'm going to share screen again, jump back into the Wayfinder and have a look here. So some of the supportive narratives or untangled narratives, my choices shape my story. Small actions count is a very atomic way to look at what you're committed to, what you're aligned with. Each thing that I choose to do, I should be saying no to something else. I should be valuing my time and other people's time and their expectations. And each time I make a decision, I should be building a case for the person I want to be. Right. And so this particular supportive narrative says, I'm going to do each, I'm going to do each choice. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to make each choice in alignment so that I don't end up in a situation where I have to figure out which thing to drop later on. It's normal to drift. Realignment is always an option, right? And so figuring out that we can get back to a place of alignment again anytime that we want to. And when we recognize things aren't perfect, that's an opportunity for us to figure it out again. That's really difficult when you're exhausted, you have too much pressure, everyone has expectations. So already knowing what you value, already knowing what you're committed to, keeping tabs on those things is so important because it's going to keep you from adding one more straw to the camel's back, which eventually breaks it. Yeah. My worth isn't tied to productivity. Alignment is about meaning, not just motion. So if your worth is, in your mind, tied to your productivity, then you become more worthy, more valuable, more outstanding as a human if you are more productive. If you do more things than you are better, is going to get you overwhelmed. It's going to get you in trouble at some point in time. So having a reasonable limit and knowing where that limit is, and then also having the values ahead of time allows you to say no to the thing at the beginning. And Jason, in that particular case, would have said no to himself. Right? I really want to do this particular conference. I want to speak at this conference. I have to say no to myself wanting that because of how much I already have on my plate. I can just look for the next opportunity after that doesn't conflict and wouldn't be too much for me to be able to do it with quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Toby's, we lost her here, but.
Gotcha.
I got it.
Maybe she will repopulate here in a moment.
All right, she said her screen froze. So I guess we'll keep going and
sure.
She can join us when she gets back.
Yeah. So a few things that we can look at in addition to that, we have internalized expectations. We might be tangled up in the fact that we're trying to be perfect, or we might be caught in a shame loop where we're just trying to do more and more and more. So believing that only flawless alignment counts is right. Only certain things tick the box. Only when I do things perfectly do I get credit. Can put us in a place where, well, if I can't do it perfectly, then that doesn't really matter. Yeah. Right. We just give up on the whole thing.
Yeah. And that can manifest in a lot of different ways where, well, Jim, you do one thing wrong, so all of you is wrong,
Right. Yeah. And there are people that some part of their work or some part of their being feels that way. And so when they make a mistake in that arena, everything else falters, everything else falls, and it doesn't really matter anymore. Might as well go ahead and because I couldn't be perfect. Sometimes emotional avoidance. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was always going to ask, I wonder if the perfectionism is to use a previous phrase, a form of refuge seeking. Mm-hmm. Is it a way to protect myself from something?
Yeah, almost everything that we experience is in some way either providing something for us or it's protecting us from something else. And I think the perfectionism could be coming from a lot of different places, right? We could spend an hour easily just talking about perfectionism. So when we look at perfectionism as a way to protect ourselves, sure, I'm going to hide behind or seek refuge in this perfectionism. Absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a couple more things. Things like emotional avoidance, avoiding necessary change because it brings up discomfort or grief or fear. Being disconnected from your agency. So I don't actually have a choice. My circumstances decide for me. It doesn't really matter because I don't really have control here anyway.
Yeah.
Or just losing sight of your own story, letting urgency or other people's priorities drive everything. And so I know what I believe is right for me and for my family, but I don't hold it true because you know what, everybody else's urgency and pressure and their priorities are the things that are really controlling this or pushing this anyway. And it doesn't really matter what I've decided. They're going to win out anyway. Right.
Yeah. And that's a form of pressure, right? That we can buckle under. And that's why I think getting clear on your values and vision, if you haven't done that exercise, because maybe one way to think of it is a lot of times we borrow other people's values,
right,
or we live in their values in
Yeah.
perhaps an organization or an institution or even a country. And so when those start fading away, it's kind of like, would you follow the law if there was no enforcer of the law?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or would you do whatever you want? And probably for some things we would do whatever we want. Some things we would still follow those because we value them. Probably a mix of things. That's where I think just self-authoring those values is so important, because man, we can get just tossed and turned in a context where those values are either gone or just scrambled.
Yeah. So I think if there was an exercise to do to work on your alignment and not having these other pressures cause you to buckle, one of them would be sitting down with some space and some time and logging or capturing those values and then reordering them in a list and saying, if it came down to these two values that were both in play in this particular decision, I know that this one would win out 9 times out of 10. Looks like the decision I'm about to make is going to be a really difficult one because it's two different values, but they're so closely prioritized that it's really going to be.
Can I show an example of how someone could do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. This is a thing me and my friend Addison developed called Movie Shapes.
Oh, I love movie shapes. Yeah.
And so if you go to Movie Shapes, we have these cards here. We have 2 columns, movie values and audience attributes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just show the values once, but you've got character, story, setting, dialogue, performance, visual, and then audio. And the idea with Movie Shapes is to figure out, why do you like the movies that you like? Why do you value them, right? And so what you can do is you can take these cards and you can just order them. So you can go, I prefer setting over character. I like dialogue over setting. Performance, the acting is really important to me. That's more than the visuals. The audio, I can handle bad visual, but audio needs to be higher. And so you can reorder these.
Yeah.
In that. And so if you think about this idea, just where you have these little cards, you could sit down, you can find online like a list of values. They're card PDFs you could download, and then you could print them and cut them out and just put them in front of you and just start reordering them until you get to kind of the top 5 or 6 or 7 out of the, maybe you got 100 values, just figure out what the top 5 or 6 are by reordering them.
Mm-hmm.
And then that can give you an idea. Okay, these are my core values. These are the things that are most important to me. So that's a cool little exercise to take your idea.
I think you did yourself an injustice there by not saying the website for Movie Shapes.
Oh, movieshapes.com for anyone that wants to check it out.
Yeah. It's a great way. It's a tool that I don't know how you had the time to build. It must have just been passion that.
Yeah, it was. We were like passionately put it out there, and we got some advanced things you can explore and run with it to help you figure out what movies you love and why. And this is kind of a values alignment idea. Is I now know my friend Addison's values. He knows my values. And we can actually recommend movies that we may not like ourselves, but we know the other person will value because I know what he values and he knows what I value. And so I'm like, hey, this is, if this is a romantic comedy, this is the type of romantic comedy you would like, where someone else may not like it, because of
Yeah,
the dialogue or something like that. So yeah, those are
that's great.
some related elements. But I think just what we value, the values alignment, it really does transcend all kinds of categories. In this case, movies that we love. So
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so when we think about the alignment and we think about the values and we think about living by our values, it's we got Toby back. Welcome back, Toby. What's that, Toby?
Sign into all over again.
Oh,
oh, okay.
well, welcome
Well,
back.
we're
Thank
glad you're
you.
back.
Sorry
Fantastic.
about that. Technology, right? Technology and law.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Your computer buckled under the pressure.
Buckled under the pressure. It had a different.
The value is not aligned.
No, no, it
It's
wasn't.
like I can't have Toby participating in this workshop any longer.
So the places that puts us, I think, is do you know what you value? Do you know how to communicate those values to other people if it's necessary? And that leads us into the idea of boundaries, right? I value this thing. And when we say that we've got a boundary, what we mean is that if this boundary gets crossed, I will choose to do this thing, right? This is something I will do if the boundary is encroached upon or crossed. And excuse me, the knowledge of those things ahead of time gives us the ability to make choices in the moment, just like triage at an emergency room. It's when we aren't clear on those things and then we're met with challenges that we will choose something because the other person seems like they have a good idea of what they value and they're very passionate about it. They're very pushy about it. It seems like they win because they are clear on this, and I don't feel like I could really say why I can't say why I would say no to this. I can't clearly communicate why this would not fit for me. So I think that's a big component of being able to be aligned, is to know what it is that you care about and being able to compare that with other things. So your example, Jason, of just taking some cards and some values, asking yourself, did something change? Do I feel differently now that I've had a child than I did before? Would I choose differently now about risking something if I were to, I think my wife, one of the coolest things, she's very much an introvert and she's not a big risk taker, but I, when we were first dating, saw that she had gone skydiving, and I thought that was really cool. I'd never gone skydiving before. And one of the things that popped up in a conversation right after we gave birth to our son Elijah was she just out of nowhere. I mean, it had been years since we talked about skydiving. And she said, I don't think I would go skydiving again. And it's like, yeah, okay, I get that, right? Life is different now and your choices are different now. And the ramifications of your choices are going to be different now. But I don't know exactly what was going through her mind at the time, but it seemed as though she was doing that prioritization. She was kind of realigning her values based on this new truth.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Anything you would add to that, Toby, or anything that sticks out?
No, but well, actually, going back to what Jim just said, understanding your values, and then boundaries. So the boundaries that you set, Jim, need to be thought out.
Mm-hmm.
I gather, and you need to have that clear in your mind as you're going down a specific road.
Yeah.
So if my values are clear, then I guess what I'm trying to say is the boundaries are the execution, part of the execution of your values. Is that does that make sense?
Enforcement and execution. Yeah.
Yeah. We, Jason and I had a conversation a while back, just based on the election cycle and things that were going on in the media at the time. And one of the questions was, at what point in time would you make a decision to no longer go along with a particular line of thought or particular action? And if you don't know already where that line is, if you don't already know where that boundary is, you're very likely to cross it. It's the flow, the energy, the passion of other people, the worry about pleasing other people. All of these things are like the current in a river. And if you don't have a really good idea of what it is you're trying to do and what you're trying to be true to, you're just going to get swept downstream. You're going to go right along with whatever is the strongest opinion in the room. And I think the people that are the strongest, the people that hold to their values the strongest, it isn't necessarily, maybe in some cases it is, about them being the strongest person. It's about them being the most clear about their values. And they've already decided that if this goes this particular way, I'm going to do this in relationship to that. I don't know if that's going to happen, but if it did, this is where I would draw the line. And then when that line gets close to being crossed, you recognize it. It's just like any other type of risk. If we recognize risk, if we recognize danger, imagine a baby that doesn't know what a grizzly bear is, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just fine. But who knows what that grizzly bear is going to do? Who knows what's going to happen? And the baby has not yet figured out that's danger, and I should not be here anymore, or I should be scared right now.
So,
Yeah.
Tim, going back to your story with your wife, so values can change and boundaries can change based upon the information that you
Mm-hmm.
have based upon your circumstances in life.
Yeah.
And I guess it takes a special a special person to say, okay, here's some more information. Here's where I am now in life. It's okay to
Yes.
change. It's
Yes.
okay to go down a different path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's when we're held captive by our previous choices and we think of them
Mm.
as I'm going to show a lack of character, or I'm going to show myself to be inconsistent or unworthy of something if I vary from a previous proclamation, then we are going to change. Things are going to change about the way that we think, what we value. It's going to shift over time, and to pretend that that's not true is doing harm. We need to be open at all times to the people in our lives. When we get married, if we get married young, or well, I mean, anytime that you get married, but the more time that you have with a person over your lifetime, they're going to change and shift. And so you're not married to the person that you met, you're married to the person that they become. And if
Yeah.
you're not consistently checking your alignment compared with theirs, if you're not consistently checking for how they might have changed their mind about something, um, I know I keep bringing up kids as kids tends to be such a family, and kids tends to be something that people identify with pretty easily because we all have parents and we all have, people in our lives that we care about, and those relationships are very important to us. Um, if we suddenly recognize that this vulnerability in my life has changed a decision that I've made in the past, and now I would need to behave in this new way. I need to communicate that to others, right? And I need to make them aware of it. And also, if I'm in a relationship with someone and they have had something change in their lives, I should be going to them and asking questions and being curious about how they might have changed in that process. And if we assume that everything that we said, but you said, honey, when we first got married, you said that you didn't want kids, and now 5 years later you're saying you do want kids, right? Why aren't you being consistent with what you said? I married a person who said the opposite. I changed. Things changed over time. Things do change, and we have to be prepared to shift and realign and figure out what our values are now. So having that be something that is malleable over time, and that we should really be asking ourselves questions about. We should be doing check-ins. I think it's important to point out.
Yeah, and
I
I
really
think
love what you just said a little while ago. You said you marry the person they become. And your example right now is just a perfect story about that. And I guess you can take that and you can say, even within a work situation, you hire somebody, and Jason, you've hired so many people, and you've hired them at one point with specific skills. But if your workplace has enough input into my skill building and what I'm doing, I become a different person than who you initially hired. And that may or not be great for the company or the job, but I become something. I love that.
Oh
Yeah.
And
wow, that what you
that's
yeah.
brilliant.
What you just pointed out, though, is a conflict of values that we see in the workplace where people will mentor and pour into someone else, but also get upset when they decide to go to another company and do
Mm,
something else or go to a different position. And so we're pouring into the person. Uh, we're not necessarily pouring into the role. They may change to a point where they no longer fit the role. They're now overqualified, or their ambition or their knowledge of themselves might give them confidence to go try something new. And so when we look at the role and the role is somehow being put above the person, we're making different decisions than if we put the person above the role.
mm,
Yeah.
So we're pouring into the person. We're not necessarily pouring, we're doing right by who they become in 5 years, even if that means we've got to find a whole new person to do that job. Oh yeah, that's going to be inconvenient. It might be hard to find somebody with those special skills, but at the same time, this person who's given their time and their energy to build what we've built is going to change and grow and become more skilled and become, they might want to pursue other things. And I need to be in support of the person first over the
mm,
role.
Yeah. I think a couple other things I'll add just in terms of boundaries. Boundaries give people an opportunity to change when you
mm,
have them and enforce them because they have to contend with them, right? So it's a force. And the other thing it does is it figures out alignment or misalignment. So if I have a boundary and I enforce that with Toby or Jim, like it's if you respect that boundary, if you're okay with that, then our relationship is fine. But if you try to violate it in any way and get around it, then that's potentially a misalignment. And so I think it's one of the most helpful ways to identify alignment and to protect ourselves from toxicity, perhaps in a business or a job or a friendship or a romantic relationship or mentorship. I think boundaries is an underappreciated and super valuable resource for us. So
Great. Yeah.
where do you want to go from here, Jim?
I don't know. I think without, if we went much further, I think we would open up a whole new avenue and be going for another hour. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
feels like a good closing
A
point.
good place to Toby, you want to give us any final words, and then me and Jim can share our final thoughts as well.
I think from the conversations that we've just had, aligning your authentic self with your values and boundaries and expectations of yourself is a hell of a lot more complex than it sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of
Well,
moving pieces, a lot of
tease
factors.
that. So you use the word authentic, Toby, and you're like a social media guru. So the social media has an interesting layer to that. But just kind of tease that out for us. Like, what do you think? How do you define that? And what does that look like if someone wants to lean into it, even if it is complicated?
Well, I guess it goes back to what we've been speaking about. Who are you? And what are your values and what do you hold dear to yourself, which may or may not be a value. It may be a passion. It may be
Yeah.
something that's just important to you. So you both talked about family and children. Um, it could be that. It could be the way that you talk to other people. It could be the way that you present yourself. And obviously, in social media right now, and this is part of it, we're using words, but we're also using images because we're doing a video and a live stream, and
Yeah.
so it's it's who you are, I think, inside, and not trying to not trying to hide it as much.
Yeah.
However, that doesn't mean letting it all hang out, because people have different comfort levels. And I think you
Yeah.
have to respect that. So I could be authentic with you both, and who you see is who you get. And then if I'm with my niece or my boyfriend, I can be authentic with them, but it's different. It's a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
kind of authentic.
Our roles are
I guess what we're
different.
saying
Yeah.
is we have different layers,
Yeah.
and
The different
Yeah.
roles
that's
that
okay.
the different roles that we hold come with their own values, and they come with their own expectations. And if we're not clear on what those are, and we enter into those roles, and we have decisions that have to be made in the role, it's going to potentially be different than if we did it from a different layer or a different place. Yeah.
Yeah. Jim, you want to go next?
Sure. I think this has been a great conversation. I'm going to give a link out after we're done with the conversation. I'll give Jason a link of some of the things that I had on screen earlier, so that people can have a look at some of these tangled narratives, some of the clearer ways to think about them, and some exercises that you can do to try to figure out what your alignment is, or figure out what your values are.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the, kind of piggyback what you said, Toby, I think of marketing as a projection or reflection of our identity. And so if you remember in high school, for those of us that were in the pre-digital era, you had that projector that the teacher had in the front of the room, and she would draw on it, and then it would put it on the wall. And so it's taking something that's there and it's magnifying, it's amplifying it. And so that's how I think about marketing, is that projection. But to do marketing well, whether it's building my personal reputation, my personal brand online, what I'm known for, the values I hold, or it's a business, the services, the values it offers, the problems it solves, that has to be grounded in an identity. That has to be grounded in something. And that, to your point, Toby, like, you have to figure out who you are and what you value in order to communicate and sort of manifest externally this projection. And I think of it like a bat signal. So if boundaries are a way to repel toxicity, our identity and sharing that with people is a way to announce, put the bat signal out there and say, hey, I'm looking for people that value these things.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that's one of the beautiful things about social media is it connects people of like values, and in places and in ways that wouldn't otherwise be found. Like me and Jim met on Twitter, and we would have never met if he didn't put the bat signal in the sky for me to see it. So
That's right. Wait, who's Batman in this situation? I feel like
Toby.
I feel like maybe you made yourself Batman, Jason. We're gonna have to talk about this.
Toby, if someone's interested in working with you, who's a good fit, and how do they connect with you?
Shoot me an email, tobyb1@gmail. Follow me on Instagram, Toby Diva, or Diva Foodies, our LinkedIn, Toby Bloomberg.
And who you're a writer, so if anyone's interested, if any publications are out there and they want to bring Toby in to write about wonderful things like culinary and cooking, she's worked with a lot of people in that industry, and she's just an expert. If you need to consult,
I love telling the stories, and that's what I love the most.
Capturing and sharing stories.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right, Jim, how about who's a good fit to work with you if someone's interested in untangling these narratives?
Sure. If you're somebody that is currently trying to make a new step in life or in a career, and you're trying to figure out who you're about to become and how to get there, or if you're somebody who feels stuck and you just don't know where it is you even want to go, this can be in just in personal life. It can be in your career. I can work with you. untanglednarrative.com. Lots of different ways to engage, one-on-one coaching all the way to community coaching, which is very affordable.
Yeah. Now, I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and I help businesses amplify their influence and income. You can check out my website, jasonscottmontoya.com, for more information, details, and resources. This has been another episode of the Share Life podcast, a Share Life Academy workshop. If you're interested in joining our free little community, we have a Discord channel where we share resources and ask questions and answer them, hold each other accountable. It's a place for people that want to prioritize the important over the urgent and move forward with their adventure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.